Picture this scenario. You walk into a bank, max out every credit card you own, then immediately turn around and lend yourself the money to pay off those same cards. Any rational person would call this financial suicide. Yet this exact scheme operates at the heart of the American financial system every single day. The United States government borrows trillions by issuing bonds, then uses its own central bank to buy those very bonds with money created from nothing. It sounds like the kind of circular madness that would land anyone else in bankruptcy court. Instead, it has become the invisible engine powering the world's largest economy. This is not some conspiracy theory whispered in dark corners. This is documented policy, happening in broad daylight with official names and press releases. The Federal Reserve openly purchases Treasury securities. The Treasury openly issues debt to fund government operations. And somehow this loop has convinced the world that America can borrow endlessly without consequence. The question is not whether this system exists. The question is how long it can survive before the magic trick becomes a catastrophe. To understand how we arrived at this point, we need to go back to the beginning. When the United States emerged from the Revolutionary War, it was drowning in unpaid obligations. Soldiers had fought without pay. Suppliers had delivered goods on credit. Foreign allies like France had advanced enormous sums to fund the rebellion. The young nation faced a choice that would define its financial future. It could default on these debts and destroy its credibility before it even began. Or it could honour its promises and build the foundation for something unprecedented. Alexander Hamilton chose the second path. As the first Secretary of the Treasury, he convinced Congress to assume not just federal debts, but also the debts of individual states. Critics called it a bailout for speculators who had bought up worthless IOUs from desperate soldiers. Hamilton saw it differently. By honouring every obligation, America would prove it was worth lending to. The strategy worked brilliantly. Investors who had written off American debt as worthless suddenly found their bonds paying reliable returns. Confidence grew, and with it, the willingness to lend more. But Hamilton's genius came with a hidden cost. From that moment forward, the United States was locked into a cycle of perpetual borrowing. Each debt payment required new debt to replace it. Each crisis demanded fresh borrowing to survive. What began as a necessity to establish credibility became the permanent architecture of American finance. The nation that had fought a revolution partly over taxation without representation had created a system where future generations would pay for today's spending without having any say in the matter. The real transformation came with the birth of the Federal Reserve in 1913. Before then, American banking was chaotic and fragile. Panics erupted regularly, wiping out savings and collapsing businesses. The Fed was designed to bring stability by serving as the banker's bank, lending to institutions in crisis and managing the money supply. But it also became something more powerful and more dangerous. It became the government's silent partner in an unprecedented financial experiment. During World War I, the partnership revealed its true potential. The Treasury needed vast sums to fund the war effort, far beyond what taxes could provide. The Federal Reserve agreed to buy government bonds directly, keeping borrowing costs artificially low and ensuring unlimited demand for Treasury debt. For the first time in history, a government had found a way to guarantee buyers for its I owe us. The Fed could simply create money and purchase whatever bonds the Treasury issued. The implications were staggering, though few understood them at the time. This arrangement set a precedent that would reshape the global economy. When World War II erupted, the system expanded dramatically. The Fed bought bonds on an unprecedented scale, financing a war machine that produced tanks, planes, and ships at rates that defied imagination. The partnership between Treasury and Federal Reserve had evolved into something entirely new, a mechanism for turning promises into money and money into power. Then came 1971, the year everything changed forever. Until that moment, the dollar was still theoretically anchored to gold. Foreign governments could demand gold in exchange for their dollars, creating a limit on how much America could borrow and spend. But as debts mounted from the Vietnam War and Great Society programs, that anchor became an inconvenience. President Nixon severed the link between dollars and gold, declaring that America would no longer redeem dollars for precious metal. In that instant, the greatest financial experiment in human history began. The dollar's value now rested entirely on trust, backed by nothing more tangible than the promise that America would honor its debts. And the mechanism for honoring those debts had become the printing press itself. Today, this system operates on a scale that would have been unimaginable to its creators. When the Treasury needs money, it issues bonds at regular auctions. Investment banks, pension funds, foreign governments, and insurance companies line up to buy these promises of future payment. China holds over $1 trillion in Treasury securities. Japan holds nearly as much. Pension funds across America treat these bonds as the bedrock of retirement security. To the outside world, it appears that global investors are eagerly financing American spending, but appearances deceive. When demand falters, when foreign buyers grow hesitant, when markets grow nervous, the Federal Reserve steps forward as the buyer of last resort. It does not need to collect taxes or raid savings accounts. It simply opens its computer systems and creates new money with keystrokes. Billions appear on balance sheets as if conjured from thin air. These freshly created dollars flow directly into Treasury bonds, completing a circle that defies every principle of sound finance taught in business schools. The scale of this operation has exploded in recent decades. During the 2008 financial crisis, the Fed purchased over $1 trillion in Treasury securities through programs with names like quantitative easing. When the pandemic struck in 2020, the buying accelerated to unprecedented levels. Trillions more flowed from the Federal Reserve to the Treasury, financing stimulus checks, business loans, and expanded unemployment benefits. The American government had discovered it could respond to any crisis by borrowing from itself. This arrangement creates winners and losers, though the costs remain carefully hidden. Politicians benefit because they can promise spending without raising taxes. Wall Street benefits because Federal Reserve bond purchases flood the system with liquidity, driving up asset prices. Foreign governments benefit as long as their Treasury holdings remain valuable. But someone must pay for this financial alchemy. That someone is you. Every dollar created to buy government bonds dilutes the value of every other dollar in circulation. When new money floods the system, prices rise to absorb it. The grocery store checkout becomes more expensive. Housing costs spiral upward. College tuition climbs beyond reach. These are not natural market forces. These are the direct consequences of monetary creation designed to fund government spending without honest taxation. The genius of this system lies in its invisibility. Most people understand taxes. They see the deductions on their paychecks and feel the bite directly. But inflation operates as a stealth tax, eating away at purchasing power so gradually that victims often blame greedy corporations or global supply chains rather than monetary policy. The Federal Reserve can finance trillion-dollar deficits while maintaining the illusion that the money comes from somewhere else. Yet this trick depends entirely on confidence. Foreign investors must believe Treasury must trust that inflation bonds are safe. Markets will remain manageable. Citizens must accept that their dollars will hold value tomorrow. History suggests such confidence is never permanent. Britain once financed a global empire through bond markets in London, until 2 world wars and mounting debts destroyed faith in sterling. France used similar monetary games to fund wars and palaces, until the system collapsed into revolution and hyperinflation. The warning signs are multiplying. China has been reducing its Treasury holdings, diversifying into gold and other assets. Russia has largely abandoned dollar reserves after facing sanctions. Central banks worldwide are accumulating precious metals at rates not seen in decades. Even allies are questioning whether America can sustain its debt trajectory indefinitely. The bond loop that connects the Federal Reserve and Treasury represents the most audacious financial gamble in human history. America has convinced the world that it can borrow endlessly from itself, creating money to buy its own debt, while maintaining the illusion of fiscal responsibility. But every empire that has played this game has eventually faced the same reckoning. When confidence breaks, when trust evaporates, when foreign creditors walk away, the printing press becomes not a solution but an accelerant to collapse. The only question is whether you will be prepared when America's greatest financial trick finally meets its inevitable end. History has the answers if you know where to look.